put my fingers in his wounds. That's what Thomas said to his best friends, the disciples, when they claimed that Jesus had risen from the dead. I don't know if he thought they were lying or if he figured they were maybe hallucinating, but he wouldn't believe them no matter what. He was being a little sarcastic perhaps when he said, I actually have to touch those wounds to really believe this, that I'll even believe my own eyes that Jesus is resurrected. And what did Jesus say to him? He said, stop doubting and believe. When he said that, I've felt maybe that at times I want to put my own fingers in Jesus' wounds, and that Jesus' response to that would be, what are you doubting for? But I think that response that he had for Thomas and for the disciples is a different kind of response than he would have for us, who have not seen. See, some people, I think, feel that Christianity is one of those things that you have to take on faith. But as I've seen it, it's more about seeing is believing. In fact, when I looked at the texts that were in the lectionary for this last week, they all converged on a single idea. The sermon that Peter delivers in Acts, and the reading from 1 Peter 1, 3-9, as well as this text we have, the story of John, saying that he won't believe unless he sees. That seeing is believing comes up, and I believe that this whole movement of Christianity wouldn't have started had it not been for seeing is believing. What would have happened, most likely, is exactly what did happen after the apostles saw their Savior, their Messiah, captured by soldiers. They scattered, so scared that one of them apparently lost his clothing en route and ended up running naked, chicken. The only one who was so brave that he understood Jesus when he said, I'm going away for a little while, that he was talking about death. The others, I must have completely lost the idea, but their leader Peter understood that he was saying that he would die. He said, oh, I'll go with you. And he ends up denying Jesus 3 times, just as Jesus predicted. So it isn't a blind faith that we follow. It's one based on evidence. And that's exactly what our scriptures say, that this Jesus God raised up, and of all that we are witnesses. Witnesses being people who've seen. That's what Peter said to this massive crowd when he went from being a denier of Jesus, saying, I didn't even know him, to testifying in front of many people that he was a witness and that this had changed him. It's what Paul says also in 1 Corinthians 15:6. It says, and that he appeared to Cephas and then to the 12. After that, he appeared to more than 500 brothers, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles. It was seeing that led them to believe. And he puts in, as Sky Jatani noted, a kind of bibliography or references here when he says, and some have fallen asleep, meaning that some are still alive. If you don't believe me, you can go and talk to them. You can go ask them. Now, we can't because it's 2,000 years later, but would these same men who returned to their old lives really have gone and died for Jesus if they hadn't been radically transformed by seeing him after he was alive, after he had risen from the dead? That's what makes many people like myself believe that this story is credible after 2,000 years, and that Jesus stands out from the messiahs, those other messiahs all forgotten, because he came back from the dead and appeared to them, and their lives were changed because of it. I don't know if you've ever felt like you wanted to have a vision, and you've said to yourself, if I could just see myself like Paul did on that road to Damascus, then I would believe, and maybe I would even radically change my life. I've said to myself, oh yeah, I would have the fervor, the passion that Paul did if I could see Jesus resurrected, or if I could see a vision like Paul did. But if I think about it, that's probably not true. Paul, he didn't really radically change his life. He was fervent and passionate before he had the vision, and he was fervent and passionate afterwards. It's just that the vision aligned his fervor for God, his passion to see this monotheistic God not blasphemed by a false Messiah. It aligned him to the truth, as that vision said, I am the God that you are persecuting, I am Jesus. And suddenly his fervor and passion was channeled. For me or you, I don't know, maybe we'd go back to our old lives after a while, like Peter did, because he was seeing Jesus transfigured in his glory. only maybe perhaps weeks before he was the one denying that he even knew him. Maybe we would go back to our old lives after we'd forgotten the kind of vision we had. I don't know if you've ever asked yourself, why does God hide himself like this? Why doesn't he just show himself to everybody like he did to Paul on this road to Damascus? Why doesn't he show himself to me? Why would he hide himself? I hadn't really thought about this question very much. I figured probably free will was a part of that. And then I heard this lecture from a man named Blake Gianta, I hope I'm saying that right, on a podcast by Premier Christian Radio. That's where I saw it. And it really opened my mind to seeing that there's perhaps many good reasons why God would hide himself. Most of those having to do with the relationship. I'll put a link up here, and if you want to listen to more than the about minute clip that I'll play of him, you can follow that link to hear this interview and a dialogue that he has with the host of Premier Christian Radio's Unbelievable, as well as another person dialoguing along, which was really interesting.
I've done a big research project on this topic at beliefmap.org, and I arranged these 14 possibilities that I'm about to list into 5 major categories. So just running through them, here they are. Category 1 says this. Some non-theists who are not resistant to belief in God are nevertheless resistant to relationship. And so if they became theists, they may even become enemies of God. And I've heard this from several members of the new atheist community. And this is relevant because the reason God is allegedly motivated to ensure that everyone is a theist is to allow for relationship. And that motivation just doesn't exist for God when it comes to non-theists who he knows would immediately reject relationship. Category number 2 goes like this. It says, for some non-believers, if they became theists in their current state, they would just form a perpetually improper relationship with God. And it could be an improper relationship where, for example, the human won't ever believe or trust that God is all good. So, for example, very plausibly, there are many people out there who will just never agree with God's views or decisions about homosexuality or hell or God's reasons for allowing death and suffering. Now, maybe God could deal with this person's aversion if the person was open to God's morally transforming them. But many people could and probably do exist who are not at all open to this kind of moral transformation. So that was number 1. And here are examples number 2, 3, and 4 of improper relationships. Number 2, a relationship where the human would instantly be or become jealous of God.
And as I've pondered this question, so why hide himself? I've thought maybe this is more layered than I imagined. There's quite a bit of relationship advantage, it seems, that Blake identifies from all the research he's done from theologians, from different great thinkers, philosophers. There's quite a bit going on here that I hadn't really thought about. As I've thought about this question for myself and thought, well, what would it be like if I was without the ability to hide my own thoughts, even from my wife or from other people I met? I remembered an old movie, and I don't know if by copyright I can show you very much of it, but I think it was called What Women Think, in which Mel Gibson, for a while at least, is able to hear the thoughts of other women, and it's quite shocking for him to even be able to hear their thoughts. And as I thought about that, and I imagined, well, what would it be like if we could all hear each other's thoughts? My wife, for example, hearing everything that I thought unfiltered. How would that be in relationship? And I realized it would be very difficult. I'll play that clip. I hope I don't get in trouble with copyright.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Don't look up. He'll make me hear another disgusting joke. He's such a schmuck.
She thinks I'm schmuck.
Whoa, lighten up in that aftershave, buddy.
What? Oh yeah, like you've got the perfect body?
As you can see, it obviously was illuminating for him, even in that short clip. And I thought, well, this isn't without precedent in the Bible. There are plenty of people in the Bible who had this experience of seeing God, if you want to say unfiltered, or without the invisibility that we now experience. And some of the obvious people who saw the power of God, at least, or the miracles, other than the disciples who got to see God in the flesh, which is still a kind of invisible mode, a hiddenness, were the slaves of Egypt, the Israelites, escaping, seeing his power, seeing waters divided, manna from heaven, a rock ushering water when their leader Moses struck it, and also seeing visibly, as Philip Yancey noted, he noted that they got to see in the sky ahead of them the fire, and at night, and the cloud during the day. They had his visible presence with them all the time. And I don't think there was any doubting in their mind his power, his miracles, even the other nations. But what was the result of that? What's the end result of their being able to see God? Well, for one thing, as soon as they couldn't see God, they were melting their earrings to make an idol which they could see. So it didn't actually bond them in any kind of relationship with this powerful God. It merely made them dependent on his power. And even for Moses, it drew them to want to see more evidence. When we look at Thomas in our story this morning, when he says, what his reaction is, I want to stick my fingers in the wombs. When he says that, and Jesus appears to him, and he actually gets to touch Jesus, his whole life is transformed. It's true. He says, he admits, my Lord and my God. He sees now Jesus not just as a rabbi or a great even prophet, but as God in the flesh. And then Jesus responds to him, have you believed because you've seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe. And I wondered to myself, why would Jesus call these people lucky? What is blessed about not being able to see? That comes to us from John 20, 28 and 29, by the way. And then as I put this together with our passage this week from the lectionary in 1 Peter 1, 3 to 9, Peter is saying that in this you rejoice. And he's talking about this faith for salvation, ready to be revealed. Even if now, for a little while, you have had to suffer various trials, Peter says, so that the genuineness of your faith, being more precious than gold, that though perishable, is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed, as in we see him. So he's talking about a genuineness of faith, and that genuineness being worth more than gold. I have a picture here of a gold mine, a massive, massive abyss in the ground of removed material. I don't know how much of that material in proportion to the gold was not gold, but if you think about that void, that emptiness that is left there, and you think about the hiddenness of God, maybe you see the parallel I do, that to find the genuineness of faith, that true gold, not just I obey out of compulsion or I obey because I've seen, but something greater in relationship. There's more needed to create that. Paul goes on, although you have not seen him, you love him. Now, I wonder what kind of relationship the Israelites had with God. I don't think love was there. I know they believed in his power. But I don't think they're seeing his miraculous power created love. But it says, although you've not seen him, you love him. I'm reading from 1 Peter 1, verses 5 through 8 now. That's verse 8. And even though you do not see him now, you believe in him and rejoice with an indescribable and glorious joy. For you are receiving the outcome of your faith, the salvation of your souls. When Moses asked to see God's glory, God said, you can't see my face, for no man can see me and live. I think of the sun and the power of the sun. The creator of a billion, or maybe a billion, billion of these suns cannot just be approached or seen as you would see your friend. And we might feel like God is our friend as we've gotten into that close relationship, even as Moses was a friend of God like that. But to actually see him, it would be like trying to get close to the sun. We'd be incinerated. And Moses was told, hey, go into this little cave and I'll cover you up, God says, with my hand. And then I'll walk by with my back turned and let a little bit of my glory come. And afterwards, Moses is radiating. It's like radiation man. You can't even look at him because of the glory in his face. So I thought to myself, what does it even mean to see God? And as I thought about that, the seeing of God is not just the witnessing of seeing his power, it's also getting to know who he is. I didn't want to present only in this video just information or something interesting. I wanted to have application. So the application that I've got for you here that I've pulled out of this for myself, the first one is honesty. It's about being authentic and not pretending about our doubts, because included in this package that God has created with hiddenness are the natural doubts that will come up. Some of us might want to pretend that we're super Christians who never have doubts. I know pastors are probably some of the worst examples of these super Christians pretending they don't have doubts. One reason might be the expectations of their parishioners that they would have all the answers. I heard recently on this Phil Vischer podcast about a survey of pastors who'd never said they don't know. And to answer I don't know requires some humility and might put your job at risk even in a pastor's mind, because they would be letting go of some of that elevation that people put them, the pedestal that they put them on. But I think that's an important thing, is to be able to admit that we don't know, because if we expect others to find this hidden God, we're going to have to admit that it was a journey for us from possibly doubt into being able to have revelation of not just seeing God's existence, but seeing his character, seeing his goodness, which is, I would say, probably the biggest reason that people do not allow God in. It's not that they don't see existence proof or reason to believe in a God, it's that the God that they have had revealed to them so far, they wouldn't want to approach. And perhaps the justice end of that and our own hearts are the biggest problem. If we are accepting that there's a God, an authority over us, that authority might require of us that we are not going to be in charge of our own moral behavior, that somebody else will make those decisions about what is moral and what is not. And particularly in the area of sexuality, I can think of, that is very important to us, that we are deciding what is right and wrong for ourselves, and are not willing to let some God, especially someone we can't even see, decide that for us in a moral code we might feel is antiquated and old-fashioned. That resistance to getting to know God is probably the deepest, when we don't want to believe in him. Perhaps it's because we haven't gotten to know him, to really see him. And if we expect others to understand God, we're going to have to be very open about our own journeys as Christians and how we have come to not just see his existence, but see his character, and how that's allowed us to come and approach him. See, when Peter was being the super Christian who said, I don't have any doubts, God, I'll follow you. All the rest might desert you, but I'll follow you. I'll lay down my life, he says in John 13:37. And Jesus says, will you lay down your life? Very truly, I tell you, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. That super Christian, working out of his own power, left Peter nowhere. And our own power is not going to deliver the goods when it comes to God. Our own pretending that we have no doubts. We can't forget who the author and finisher of our faith is. Reading again in 1 Peter 3:9, our reading today, it says, by his great mercy, he has given us a new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. By his great mercy, not out of our own muster or muscling up or being brave. But this started with Jesus. See, if we rely on the braveness of others, as again Sky Jatani noted in one of his daily email devotions, we're going to end up deserting God, just like Peter did. And remember that Jesus had many followers. His close friends, though, were nowhere to be seen. Who carries his cross but a Cyrene man? He's left alone, deserted, when it comes down to our strength. We need to find that source of strength, and we need to be honest about how in us we don't have it, and in us we might be left with only doubts and questions. I like those who are honest, and I've appreciated John Foreman, the lead singer of Switchfoot, in his honesty. Over the years, his honesty has grown, I feel, in his lyrics. He wrote, "I'm so confused. What's true or false? What's fact or fiction after all? I feel like I'm an apparition's pet, but you haven't lost me yet." He wrote that in a song called Yet. And in another song from John Ellis, lead singer of the band Tree 63, in an interview he went to say that if he had released these words, which he wrote quite some time ago, he didn't think the public, the Christian public, was willing to endorse it, to support it. And he didn't feel he could release it along such, sure praise songs like Blessed Be Your Name, that talk about our willingness to follow you through the desert and that you'll be blessed in all of our hard times. He made that song of Matt Redman famous in his radio version. And at the same time was writing these lyrics, "How can I be sure that you are really there, when all I hear these days from you is silence? You make it dark so I can't see, and you steal my heart, and then you leave. Almighty God nailed to a tree, you make it hard to believe." So recently, on his now Kickstarter-funded album Land, he's released that song, and he feels like he's, after perhaps 20 or 30 years of singing, authentic enough to offer his doubts to the public. And if we do that, I think there's power in that, when we can offer our doubts as well as our confidence. God is not surprised by our doubts. We read in Psalm 103, "As a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him. For he knows how we are formed. He remembers that we are dust." He isn't surprised. In fact, he felt abandoned too. Jesus on the cross said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" So human that he experienced his own feelings of being abandoned. He quoted Psalm 22, where David continues on saying, "Why are you so far from saving me from the words of my groanings?" This is David, the hero with the heart after God, who felt these doubts, this abandonment. And Job felt abandonment, and so did John the Baptist even, the one that Jesus calls the greatest prophet. So if these heroes of faith have admitted their doubts, I think it's a powerful thing for us to admit them too. And I think there's a power in the hiddenness, where as we press into God, it invites us to get to really know him. That's what I think is the deepest power in the hiddenness. It was that we discover not just his power, but we get to know his heart. As we've seen Peter on the water, for example, when he sees Jesus, I think there's a bravery that says, okay, I can do this too, and he starts to walk on the water in that bold faith. But I know that as it's perhaps seen as his failure when he falls into the water, when he looks at the waves, his lack of faith, I believe that there's something in that, though, for us, that we see in Peter. He discovers, yes, God's power here, but he also discovers God's mercy. And as he falls into the wave, his eyes go off of Jesus. Jesus lifts him up and grabs him out. And that's, I believe, the power that we can share with others, is that Jesus is there when we have the doubts to lift us out of those waves of doubt. As we press into God, if you're willing to do that, to press into a God who's maybe hidden or silent or distant, you may experience, as this same singer from John Ellis from Tree 63 experienced, that for one brief and shining moment, you feel like you've touched the blessed raiment, ransomed, healed, restored, forgiven, and adored. And you may also find a more common experience, and that's, you may hear nothing but silence. And you may say to yourself, as so many atheists have, well, a God who is loving would not be silent. A God who is loving would not be hidden. Surely there must be another way. There must be another way than the cross, the shame of him hanging there. A God could have figured out another way to redeem us than killing his own son on a cross and putting all that shame out there. There must be an easier way, you might say. There must be an easier way than being hidden and having us believe in him when we can't even see him. Well, God's style doesn't seem to be to do the easy thing. It seems to be to do the hardest thing. And he isn't afraid of the pain, of the rejection. I can just imagine how difficult it would be to be invisible, to make relationships. How would you make a relationship when you're basically a ghost, when you basically couldn't be heard. Yet somehow God is so miraculous that he does make these precious relationships who rejoice in him, in their sufferings, in the silence, as Peter says. I think that hiddenness plays an important role, in fact, in getting us to on our side, move closer to him. I think of God as a lion, and as we went to the zoo last week, and my little daughter was excited at the fact that the lion for one time was right next to the fence, this big papa lion, and she walked right up to it, and then it gave just the littlest of growls at her, and she said, "I want to go see the ostriches," and she ran away. Just its littlest growl. And then as we were walking later, seeing the hippos way on the other side of the park, we were wondering, what is that noise? Oh, that's the lion roaring. It could be heard from miles, I'm told, and it was a terrifying sound. That isn't going to draw us closer to God, seeing his power necessarily. But in his hiddenness, he does draw us closer to really get to press in and know him. As Rich Mullins wrote, "I believe what I believe. It's what makes me what I am. I didn't make it. No, it is making me. It's the very truth of God, not the invention of any man." He felt that power and the words of God having their transformation in him. And I've experienced that too. I invite you to press into God, to offer your prayers to him. I believe that as you do, you might see God for the first time. And you may hear nothing but silence, as so many people do. But I hope that pushes you to press in further. And I believe that the greatest seeing will be when your eyes are closed. Thanks.